The world in which we live is a familiar world, a world of people we know and ordinary plants and animals of our everyday experience. But the life we see about us is not the only life. Life also exists on a much smaller scale. There are very tiny forms of life in the air we breathe and in the waters of our lakes and ponds. A jar of water like this, just taken from a pond, contains plants and animals so small that dozens of them can be found in a single drop of water. Such a drop is a miniature world, a world that can be entered only through the microscope, which will magnify our drop many times. We can get an idea of what this means from the needle in the boy's hand. In our everyday world, a needle is a pretty small thing, but when we put it into our drop of water under the lens of the microscope, it looks immense. Here is a world in which darting little animals are smaller than a needlepoint. This is the miniature world of the microscope, and here is life in its simplest forms. These tiny living plants and animals carry on every one of the fundamental processes of life. There are 4 things that every living thing must be able to do: obtain food and use it to produce growth and energy, move either from place to place or within itself, react or respond to changes in surrounding conditions, and reproduce its own kind. In pond water, the basis of animal life is simple plants, which are their main food supply. These single-celled desmids and diatoms are common green algae. With the aid of sunlight, these plants make their own food from minerals. That food is the green matter called chlorophyll. Water net is another one of these green algae, which are an abundant food supply for pond life. Even simpler than most algae is amoeba, the simplest one-celled animal. Amoeba has no definite shape. It is just a tiny bit of jelly-like material called protoplasm. This living substance, protoplasm, performs the life activities in any cell. This moving, living mass is held together by a cell wall of denser protoplasm. A contractile vacuole, which we see here as a white bubble, acts as a pump to collect and expel waste liquids. Food is absorbed directly into the protoplasm. On the left, a tiny animal is actually being entrapped by 2 of the pseudopods, or false feet, of the amoeba. The color of an amoeba varies, depending pretty much upon its latest meal. The green stem in the lower right is Spirogyra, a common water plant. Vampirella, a species of amoeba, feeds on Spirogyra. With needle-like pseudopods, Vampirella breaks open the Spirogyra cells and sucks out the green ribbons of chlorophyll. The cylindrical cells of Spirogyra are joined end to end in slim threads. The 2 strands here are linked together by small bridges of protoplasm. This is called conjugation, the simplest type of sexual reproduction. The protoplasm from 2 cells unites to form a new cell. Spirogyra on the left is identified by its spiral ribbons of chlorophyll. The round object is Volvox. Volvox, like Spirogyra, manufactures its own chlorophyll, but like amoeba or any typical animal, it moves about. Volvox is really a colony of thousands of single-celled plant animals. Each cell has 2 small whips of protoplasm, or flagella, which lash about, rolling the colony over and over. Thus, the individual cells work together for the good of the whole group. The fundamental life processes are carried on with greater efficiency by Paramecium, the slipper animal. A cell wall which is stiffer than that of amoeba gives Paramecium a definite shape. The entire cell wall is covered with cilia, tiny hair-like projections. Moving rapidly, these cilia literally row the streamlined animal through the water in every direction. Paramecium feeds on the tiniest of plants, which are swept into the animal by extra strong cilia lining the mouth groove, another improvement over the simpler amoeba. Paramecium can reproduce sexually by conjugation as well as by fission, which is simply splitting in 2, as we see here. Other simple animals, including amoeba, reproduce by this method. Like Paramecium, these bell animals are one-celled ciliates. but they live attached to plants and stones and do not use the cilia for locomotion. Their cilia are specialized for feeding. They can be seen as a ring around the open end of the bell-shaped body. The strong, rapid beat of the cilia creates a little whirlpool by which food particles are sucked into the gullet or throat. Vorticella is named for this characteristic whirlpool or vortex. The body is mounted on an elastic stalk, which anchors the animal to plants or stones in its feeding ground. The slightest disturbance causes a reaction like that of a coiled spring. A giant of the microscopic world is Stentor, the trumpet animal. Its single cell may stretch out to 1/10 of an inch in this feeding position. Like Paramecium, its body is covered with small cilia, and like the bell animals, its mouth is encircled by large cilia. In Stentor, the cilia around the mouth are fused in groups called membranelles. Actual grains of pigment in the body wall give color to the various species of Stentors: brown, green, or blue. A Stentor looks like a deep-sea monster as it streamlines its shape for swimming. Notice how the strong membranelles are used as propellers as it loosens its anchorage and swims off. In its structure and adaptability, Stentor is one of the most complex single-celled animals. But these single-celled plants and animals are not all the forms that might be found in our drop of water. Some are composed of many cells and are quite specialized. One of these is Hydra, whose sac-like body of 2 layers of cells makes it a relative of the jellyfishes and corals. Hydra is a meat-eater, lurking like an octopus with outspread tentacles, until some small animal brushes against them. Then the Hydra paralyzes the prey with a shower of poisonous threads. The motionless animal is then seized by the Hydra's tentacles and transferred to its mouth. At certain times of the year, Hydras may reproduce sexually by developing specialized cells, which form eggs or sperms. Usually they reproduce by budding. This process, like fission, requires only one parent. Either a male or a female Hydra can grow a bud, which shares the nourishment of the parent's body. Nerve cells in both parent and bud coordinate their muscular reaction until the bud breaks off. The round object here is a Volvox colony. The swift little animal feeding around it is a Rotifer, another many-celled form of microscopic life. These free-swimming rotifers are moving about diatom plants, but sometimes they attach themselves temporarily to a feeding spot. In fact, some species of rotifer remain more or less permanently attached to a plant or stone or tiny object. Under the high-powered microscope, we can see the complex internal structure. Rotifers have a tube-like digestive system with a mouth and anus for one-way traffic of food. For chewing, a rotifer has a strongly muscled food chopper called a mastax in its throat. The circle of cilia crowning the head sweeps smaller plants and animals into the mastax. Other species of rotifer are even more specialized. This type builds itself a protective tube by cementing together tiny bits of debris, while this species lives in colonies. The beautiful lobes with their moving cilia seem to revolve, giving us the name rotifer, which means wheelbearer. These lovely living forms are much more complex than the simple amoeba, but we have learned that all living things must meet the 4 basic requirements of life: moving, reacting, obtaining food, and reproducing. These are the same problems that higher forms of life in our familiar world must solve. The same perfection of detail, the special adaptations for more efficient living that we see in our own world are no less apparent in the teeming life in a drop of water.